Hey everybody, welcome. Good afternoon. Just about 2 minutes past 12. I hope you're all good on this sunny Friday. I was listening to the radio this morning. Apparently, the UK is going to be hotter than Spain today. So get your shorts out. We're ready for the beach if you live near the beach. Or like me, is going to go for a walk after this webinar and enjoy the park. So welcome. It's Friday. It is the fifth day of Equal Parenting Week. We made it. We made it to Friday. It's been a big week, everyone. It has been a big week. And I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has got behind Equal Parenting Week, made it a thing. Social media has been going crazy. We've had billboards up around the country. We've had webinars every day. We had an amazing launch event on Monday. And tomorrow, of course, we have Push for Paternity Leave nationwide. So bring a family, bring a pram, bring a nan. We are walking for better paternity leave in the UK. Equal Parenting Week is all about how we degender caring responsibilities, how we normalize male caring, how we tackle the motherhood penalty. And there's two things that we have tried really hard. I think we've been successful, but we've tried really hard to make sure our threads that go throughout Equal Parenting Week, the conversation, the activities that we've been doing. The first is that this conversation this week is for everybody. It's not just for married, partnered couples. It is also for same-sex couple families, co-parenting families, families who are parenting children with additional needs, parents who have chronic health conditions. This conversation this week is for absolutely everybody. And we've had some good feedback that it's been reflected and received in that way, which we are delighted about. And the second thing, which is an important thread, is that equal parenting is often not a 50-50 utopia. It's not us skipping through the meadows with the rainbows and the unicorns. I wish it was, but parenting and equal parenting and sharing the care is very rarely like that. Often it is messy, but it is so important. What it is the intention to come to the table and make decisions and share the care in a way that helps both parents to thrive no matter what your circumstances are. And that is why today's webinar is so important. You know, when we were designing the content, we really wanted to make sure we are as representative of different types of families as possible. And so today we are going to be focusing really on the co-parenting, separated parents experience. And what does Equal Parenting Week look like in that scenario? So we have some amazing panelists that are going to be sharing their insights. We have James Hayhurst, who is the founder of Parents Promise. They do incredible work to help parents to think about what might happen if you do separate. And they also do loads of education in schools and workplaces. So we're going to hear from James. We're also going to hear from Verity, who is a CEO at 1+1. And, you know, we had a pre-chat before this webinar. She has amazing things to say about healthy relationships. Things that I'm learning myself. So this is just good practice for anybody, to be honest. Any human should hear what Verity has to say. And we have a couple, a co-parenting couple, Linda and Johnny, who have two children between them. They co-parent, and they are going to be talking about how they make it work between them. So we're really excited to hear from Linda and Johnny too. And this conversation is important. You know, the conversation about how we share the care is not a nice to have. It's not some new woke conversation. This is life-changing stuff. This is how we make sure we reduce stress on working parents. This is how we make sure we address the motherhood penalty, which makes up around 88% of the gender pay gap. This is how we make sure that mothers aren't left doing around 60% of the unpaid care that they currently do now. This is making sure dads can have a fruitful, really good relationship with their children. We know that dads who are involved in day-to-day care have better life satisfaction and lower problems with their mental health. So this is important to our well-being, our longevity, and our happiness. And I just want to ground us really on how important this conversation is. So if you're listening, please put in the chat who you are, where you're dialing in from, and what it is that you want to get out of today's webinar. And also we have a Q&A box. So put any questions in the Q&A. And at the end, I'm going to bring all the panelists together and we're going to have some time to throw questions at them. So any questions in the Q&A box. Okay, let's get on with it. So I would like to welcome our first guest to the stage. Mr. James Hayhurst. Welcome, James. Lovely to have you here.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Great.
So let's get into it first. Let's set out some of the context. Now, I am here to learn from you all as well. You are the experts in this. I am here as much to learn as anyone else. So talk to us about the current context around
Mm,
co-parenting. How many couples in the UK are co-parenting, and what are some of the factors that impact how effectively
yeah.
people co-parent?
I'm going to disappoint you in your first question in that, which I think is part of some of the issues. Very little data around separation, and certainly separation kind of when it goes to the family courts about the numbers and the outcomes. The Family Solution Group did a piece of research in 2021, sort of estimated that about 280,000 children are affected by separation a year. So that's about the size of a city of Newcastle. So quite a lot of people are separating, and we know it's and Verity will have some more stats. Co-parenting, it's really hard. It's really hard to get the data, and as you said earlier, there it varies in what that looks like. But the second question, I can probably better answer, and then of course Linda and Johnny will give us some real examples. I suppose it's about understanding how important it is to separate well. So if you understand that you've sort of got to put yourself second and put your child first, no matter how difficult that will be. That's a really important thing to do. Um, be as child focused as you can, and have compassion for the other person and for yourself and for the child. It's really, it's reflecting some of the stuff we talk about and the structure of the parents' promise. But I think that is it. And I think culturally, sadly, in the UK and in many other countries, we don't understand, we don't appreciate how damaging separating, I have to watch my language, badly can be. So people separate, and we don't get married wanting to separate, but it happens, and you can separate very well, as I'm sure we're about to hear, and your child can thrive and you can thrive if we essentially start to use the child as a weapon or kind of can't regulate ourselves. That's when we're starting to really affect the young people. And our ambition and mission as an organisation is to try and educate the UK. It's a big one, but look, to have more people like Linda and Johnny, that if you do it well, that's a really good thing, and that's what we need to aspire to be doing.
Mm. So talk to us about parents' promise. Like, what do you do, and how does it
What is
help
it?
parents like prepare for an amicable breakup?
Yeah, good question. So there's a few things we do. But the promise itself is, it was really sort of a PR idea, but what it is it's like a prenup. So somewhere between a prenup and I will, I'd say. In that it's hopefully won't. I think I will. Sadly, we're all going to need one of those. Hopefully, you won't need this. But what we thought or we observed was, no, people, there isn't this education around separation, and say 40-50% of parents will separate. But yet we did a survey when we launched, and we knew this to be the case. We discovered that 95% of parents had discussed what they do if they win the lottery, but
Mm.
less than 5% had ever talked about separation.
Hmm.
And we can understand the reasons for that. Now, the parents' promise is a discussion to have. Ideally, it may seem weird, but at an NCT class or something. I know that they're at the launch event on Monday, where you go, hopefully this will never happen, but if we do separate, let's agree and commit to each other that we'll do the best for our child. And there's three very simple promises or parts of the promise. We will always make sure the child sees lots of both of us and our wider families. We will always essentially be nice to each other, and we won't criticize each other in front of the child, and we will work together to create the conditions for a child to thrive. We can't just be texting each other, and it's not just about the kind of alimony or CM. It's like, how do we work as a unit? Because when you have a child, you're there for life, and you should be committed to that child. So that was the kind of backdrop. The idea, and obviously we'll send it around in the notes, is for people to have a look at that, and when they're together and not in front of the children, maybe to speak about that, and to sign that. Or if you are early stages of separation, it's a good way to hold yourself accountable to kind of what good looks like.
Yeah, and we spoke in the previous just now about,
Yeah,
I guess, the importance of trying to
yeah,
separate in a
yeah.
good, quote unquote, good way.
Good way. Yeah,
Obviously, that's not always possible because you can't
no,
control
yeah,
the other person.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
for people who are maybe in that situation where they haven't got a
Mm,
amicable relationship and the other partner's not
mm,
playing ball.
yeah.
What can you say to those people in regards to the work that you do and how you can support them?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. I'd love to say there's a solution. There's often not a solution. One of the sort of going back a step, one of the thoughts we had around the parents' promise was when you get married, if you get married in whatever a church, a registry office, or wherever you get married, there's usually a moment where your friends say they'll support you in your journey. And what we envisaged when the promise was signed was that your best friends would support you, and ideally, you need your network to keep you honest to that. What tends to happen can be the opposite. And somebody doesn't like him or her, and they've done something or they've not done something, and and you end up in these sort of echo chambers, which isn't helpful. So I suppose it's just trying to be as calm as you can and try and have reasonable dialogue. There's there's not, and maybe you go to some of the expert organisations like Verity. There's some real evidence that shows how important it is to do well, to do
Mm.
separation well. So maybe go for an evidence-based approach. Whether that other person will listen, who knows? But at the moment, there's sadly not really any sort of, and people think there is some sort of court way through this. Often orders sadly aren't ever really enforced. So you may be able to see your child, or they may be able to see you X numbers of days. If the other parent doesn't want that, often you won't see your child, and that's sadly that's the current bleak reality, and we're hoping to kind of move away from that a little bit. Hopefully,
Mm. Thank you.
sorry to be negative.
No, you know what?
Yeah,
This conversation is not
yeah,
always, or it's not
yeah,
about sugarcoating things at all.
yeah. So how it is.
It's
Yeah,
about the reality.
yeah,
We're here to
yeah,
reflect what people are
yeah,
experiencing, and
yeah.
so there'll be negative parts, positive parts, ups, downs, and we're going to keep it real. So that's all
It
good.
is what it is. It's true. It's the truth. Yeah,
It's the truth.
yeah,
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 we're here to tell the truth. So, you do a lot of work in terms of workplace support and
yeah,
in schools because we do a lot of work with
yeah,
workplaces, and I know that working with dads particularly, every dad is in their own unique situation.
yeah,
Um, Often the dads that engage with parenting out loud, they often have children with additional needs, and often they
yeah,
also and or co-parenting, because I
yeah,
think they've come to us in a realization that they do need some extra support and some community, and they want to
yeah,
find other people who can support them.
yeah.
I'm very aware that obviously during the separation that can be a stressful time, but then
Mm,
afterwards you may need potentially
mm,
some new flexible working or more support. So
yeah,
talk to us about
yeah,
what you do to support parents who are going through separation or have separated in
yeah,
the workplace, and then work you do
yeah.
in schools as well.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Yeah, so we try every couple of years to do something useful. It's a bit like we move relatively fast to make things, we like to say, versus Mr. Zuckerberg. And so we've got a couple of initiatives that we've launched just practically to change the conversation and to make a difference where we can. So the first one, as you referenced, in 2023, we observed that there are lots of great HR policies, more and more so, but none of the companies that we knew seemed to have anything around separation, and yet there were huge numbers that were separating, or the sort of standard. So we set to try and resolve this, and with support of an MP, we contacted a lot of big companies, and we created a toolkit which you can find online, which we can send around. So resources for line managers and resources for people going through separation. But most importantly, we got a number of large companies to commit to. It's actually a small thing which they found easy to do and were happy to do, was to create a policy for separated people. And it wasn't really doing anything different post COVID, but it was just acknowledging that they're a subgroup. And as you said, when you're separating, you're going to need to set your life up differently. So you're going to need a bit more flexible working. You're going to want some counselling, hopefully. You're going to want people to understand your situation, because separation is not a kind of one and done thing. They can be quite complex. And essentially what we discovered in the data is, as per usual, loads of people have mental health issues, or they're less, or even they leave their jobs, but very few had a policy. So we've created a simple policy, and that's had good take up. And then secondly, in the area of schools, we launched something in September. The hypothesis was that if there is parental conflict, or whatever you want to call it, it can spill into schools. And we assumed, again, from first and second hand experience, that teachers weren't trained. It's not their fault. But what happens is they don't know what to do, and they're told things that maybe aren't true. It's stressful for them, it's stressful for the child, and it creates more work. So we created some resources We found only a third of schools have a separation policy. So we created one of those and some very simple fact sheets for teachers and for parents to understand what you need to know legally, practically, and emotionally. So that's two things we can distribute after the webinar, no doubt.
Brilliant, thank you. And yes, everyone that has joined will get copies of those resources. Thank you, James. Really, really interesting. You're doing
Thank
brilliant
you.
work.
Thank you, William.
We're going to bring you back up for some questions. So, anyone listening, questions for James in the chat, and we'll pose them to him later on. Cheers, James. Verity, welcome. So, Verity is a CEO at One Plus
Hello.
One, and has really interesting things to say about relationships and separation, which I found fascinating. So, Verity, welcome. First question: speak to us about becoming emotionally ready for separation, ending one relationship, another one with that same person. How do we go about doing that in terms of for ourselves? How can we prepare ourselves for that start of a new relationship with the same person that we are now separated from?
Yeah, so I'll just ground us in the relationship science to begin with. But just before we do that, because James handed the stat to me, I thought, let's just quickly check how many parents we're talking about. And I think it's just really important to share that at the end of 2024, there were 2.5 million separated families in Great Britain, 4 million children in those separated families, and 63% of separated families had child maintenance arrangements. So it is a really significant number of families that we're talking about here. So I just wanted to kind of give you those stats straight away. And so grounding us in the relationship science, just which kind of was what led us to emotional readiness. So One Plus One is an early intervention relationship support charity. So we're kind of about using relationship science to help us to understand how relationships form, how they develop, how they're maintained, why they break down, and why they work. So basically kind of understanding how people get on, why they do, why they don't, and also what influences that. So in the kind of looking at relationship breakdown and the transition from the intimate relationship to the co-parenting relationship, which obviously is what James was just talking about, how important that is to see that as a new relationship. Relationship science can help us to understand what might be at play in terms of that transitional phase, and what we can do to kind of help us to be ready. So what we did as our kind of, we always kind of go back to the evidence and look at, okay, what helps people to become emotionally ready? How can people move through this transitional phase in a better way, in a quicker way? And ultimately that's going to impact the children more positively. So we did some work around emotional readiness, which is basically how you adapt to your relationship breakdown, and then how ready you are to then re-engage in post-separation negotiations. And obviously, when you have children, you're going to have to communicate way before you're ready, right? So that's obviously going to be the case. So when your relationship ends and you have children, the reality is that kind of you're starting quite quickly to form your new co-parenting relationship. And so with emotional readiness, what we try to do is understand where people are at, kind of in that kind of whole spectrum of being ready, and all of those feelings and emotions that people go through during separation. And how we can move them to a point where they can be ready for post-separation discussions. And what we do with that is help to develop skills. And actually some of those skills are the skills that we need to have any relationship. But of course, this particular relationship has just broken down. So there's been a lot of kind of difficult stuff going on. So when you're making that transition, it can be quite helpful to start to kind of think about it in a business-like way and try to remove the emotion from it, which can sometimes then kind of keep some of that emotional baggage from your previous relationship sort of out the way, and try to focus on, your children, keep them front and center, be business-like, and use those kind of skills that you can learn to try and have those conversations better. So, for example, when you're starting that new relationship, you might sort of like set some guidelines as to how you're going to communicate. How often are you going to talk or text to begin with? What's going to be the kind of best way to start that new relationship? And look at kind of what you know about your ex-partner. So if they work really long shifts, don't send them a message when they're going to be coming home and really tired and they actually need to decompress. So use all of the knowledge that you have to the best kind of way of then communicating with them in this new relationship. So in the new part of the relationship that you have. And we have developed a kind of relational capability skill set. So it's basically all of those skills that we all know about how to have good relationships, which is staying calm, just stopping, listening, seeing something from the other person's point of view, being able to speak for yourself, and then using all those skills to eventually be able to take you to a point where you can be ready to negotiate and be ready to have those discussions. But sometimes when you're in the very early stages of that new relationship, it can be as much as just to kind of stop the conversation. If you can see it escalating, just to stop and just to stay calm, and then just to arrange another time to speak, those sorts of things. So really kind of like tapping into those really basic skills that you need to be able to kind of take the emotion out of it and be able to have that conversation. And like James said in the beginning, keep your children front and center, because that's why you're having this new relationship, because of them, or the child, or the children. And so keeping them front of center is exactly why you're there. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be communicating so early following your relationship ending.
Yeah, and we know that's fascinating, and I just love what you were saying there in regards to like we have to move to a new relationship with the same person. I think when you look at it like that, it just makes sense. And obviously, you've done loads of work in terms of how you do that emotionally for yourself, which is so interesting. In relationships, every relationship, we argue. Arguments are part of a part of human relationships, but there is like a good way of arguing, I think, and there's a bad way of arguing. And I think with me and my wife, I think we argue quite well. We don't have many arguments, but when we do, we don't call each other to extreme names, and we don't raise our voices. I think we keep that respect. But what would you say in terms of like reducing the parental conflict when you are separating? How can you have healthy conflict, and how can you argue in a quote unquote good way?
Well, like you said in the very beginning, we're all humans and we all argue 100%. And sometimes we don't argue well, and we just have to chalk that up to experience. And oftentimes we get in those situations because our stress levels are so high. And so when you're in a relationship that's intact and you're not separated, it's still hard even then to argue well when you're both stressed and you've got all of these different demands that are pulling on you, but you're kind of invested in that relationship. So you might kind of, be able to back down more quickly, see it from the other person's point of view, more quickly back to those skills again. But when you're forming your new relationship with your ex-partner, so much has gone before. And so it's kind of, again, it's sort of using those same skills that you have in any relationship, but thinking, okay, what's forming this new relationship? What's the point of this new relationship? Is the children. And so it's using them to help you to regulate your emotions, because, really in arguing better, it is about self-regulation. It is about, and the first thing we can do is just stop where we are. And if it's on the phone, if it's in person, whatever we're doing, or even if it's via messages, just stop, take a breath, then you can obviously calm down, self-regulate. And then a really key thing in arguing better, I think, is seeing it from the other person's point of view. Even if you really, really don't want to, sometimes it's just a really good habit is to reframe it from the other person's point of view on your own, write it down, or just in your head, reframe it. What's going on for them? what's happened today, what's happened at work, are they stressed? Try and see it from their point of view, put yourself in their shoes. Even if you still don't agree, it just helps you to understand the context and the world that we're all living in. We're bringing stuff with us all the time. And so it's just helpful to kind of use that understanding and the knowledge of that person and what they look like when they're stressed, and actually thinking about when you can approach these discussions. And with co-parenting as well, and whether together or separated, with your arguing, it's so important that your children see you resolve those difficulties well, because that's modeling that really good kind of relational approach. So of course people will see parents disagreeing. Of course, you're two different people, you're going to have different views, but when they can see you kind of like come back to it together and go, well, actually, you can demonstrate good skills by helping to demonstrate to them that you have actually kind of come to an agreement and that you're both on the same page, and all of that kind of thing. And the evidence says that both parents have this unique role and this unique but equally important role. And that's why I just think this Equal Parenting Week has got so many different important messages, because of those different roles. Whether you're together or separated, they're critical to children's development. And so it kind of almost doesn't matter if you're together or separated. What matters is how you both parent equally, how you communicate well, how you argue well, and how you demonstrate that to your children.
Yeah, great advice, great words. So last question around more key takeaways. And I kind of want to angle this from two separate positions. So if someone's listening and they're it's not amicable with their ex, they're finding their relationship quite difficult, they want to share the care in a way that works for both of them, whatever that looks like, and they want to try to maintain a better, healthier relationship, what would you say to that person listening in terms of what they can do to somewhat improve the situation for themselves and their children?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really difficult. As you say, there are so many situations that aren't amicable, and some situations that kind of start off quite amicable, but then the whole system and the process makes it worse because it's kind of so entrenched and so difficult to get to the agreements that you want to. So that's obviously can be really frustrating as well. But I mean, I suppose what I would go back to is what we know from the kind of research is that if you can work through those stages of your relationship breakdown, through that transition of becoming more emotionally ready, accepting the dissolution of your relationship, accepting where you are, and looking at what you want to see on the other side of that, in that new relationship, and doing work on that. So however you can do work on that. And, there are lots of services around that are paid for, where you can join apps, or you can go to coaching services and counseling services and things like that. There are fewer services that are freely available, but I think it's worth us probably posting them actually following this if we can, to help people to just be able to do some work on improving their communication skills and where they are at in terms of that relationship breakdown, and processing through that transition to be able to get to the other side where they can actually have those conversations. Because the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes. And like I said, it can often, unfortunately, because of the system, get worse.
Yeah. Thank you, Verity. Thank you so much. We're going to bring you back on for the Q&A at the end. Lots more to hear from you, I'm sure, but thank you so much. Okay, so throughout the week, one thing we've really tried to do is get experts, practitioners, but also people who are living it day to day, couples, parents, families on stage speaking about their lived experience. And when I put it on LinkedIn a few months ago, we're looking for a co-parenting couple to come and speak to us. Linda jumped in the DMs and was like, yeah, me and Johnny will do it. And I met Johnny and they were really cool. And I actually learned a lot from them in terms of how I can improve my own marriage. So I'm just delighted to hear from you. So welcome, Linda and Johnny. You're co-parenting. You've got 2 kids. Let's start with a little bit of background. So Linda, I'll come to you first. Tell us about you both, how many children you have, what age were they when you separated, how old are they now, anything else we should know to help to get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for tabling this conversation as part of Equal Parenting Week, because I think it's a really important discussion, and so many families are in this kind of dynamic and this kind of setup. And it's nice to be positioned as a good example, but I do want to make it absolutely clear that it's not been without its difficulties, and it's not been, it's been very painful at times. But I like to think that we've done it in the best way we could have. But it's certainly been up and down for sure. So we have 2 children. Johnny and I were married. We had we've got a girl and a boy. They were 4 and 7 when we separated. We're a few years down the line now, so they are 10 and nearly 13. And so, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is probably from that few years of experience that we now have, and what we've tried and what's not worked and what we've now established has worked. And coming back to Verity's point a moment ago, I think what's quite, in reflection, probably quite important for this conversation is that actually at the point of separation, Johnny and I were running a business together, and had done for many years. So we had that different relationship dynamic already going on in terms of, the caveats of, am I wearing my professional hat today when I'm having this conversation, or am I having the wife hat on when we're having all the parenting? So for us, maybe transitioning into that co-parenting dynamic potentially wasn't as hard for us because of that.
Johnny, anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. But I think just to reiterate what Linda said, really, is we are a few years down the line, and it has ebbed and flowed, our relationship. We've always tried to maintain positive co-parenting relationship for our children. But there have been times when the relationship hasn't been great. But there's also times, hopefully like today, where we can come together and, just share our story a little bit more on what's worked and what's been difficult.
Yeah. And one thing, when we spoke beforehand, you said something that makes complete sense, which I didn't think about before, which was how you split up is very likely to have an impact on how you co-parent. And I just didn't think about that before, but it makes complete sense, right? Like, I assume if you split up well, and you have good communication, then the likelihood is that hopefully that will carry on and you can co-parent effectively too. So talk to us a little bit about how you both broke up. How did you split? Talk to us about what that time was like. How did it feel? What were the practicalities? What were the logistics around that time of life, Johnny?
Yeah, sure. So I want to, just for Linda's sake, maintain some boundaries around the detail that we're going to go into. It was a really difficult period. It was during just before COVID had hit, so we spent lockdowns together, knowing that we were separated and planning to move house. So lockdown was fun. We also had a business to run, so that was really challenging. And for me, it was, whilst it was, we describe it as an amicable split, that doesn't mean it was easy at all. Like Linda said earlier, it was really challenging. We've been married for, I'm going to get the number wrong, 8 years ish. And, coming to that end of that relationship was a really difficult period. We were trying to homeschool our kids as well. So I guess the benefit we had was we did have this business relationship, and we could switch hats to parent or husband-wife relationship a little bit easier. But I think it was about, and I remember distinctly the conversation that we had at the time that we had made the decision to split, that for me, it was about not using blame or power to as a foundation for that new relationship going forward, not wanting to undermine the other parent in front of our kids. And I think in my mindset, and it's hard at the time to have the kind of long view on things, but it's about making sure that our kids are going to have a more positive childhood going forward, if Linda and I are co-parenting effectively, and as having as a positive relationship as we could. So I think what James said earlier around compassion and trust were really important, and those things ebb and flow like anything in any relationship. Excuse my cat. And
he's excused,
yeah,
or he or she is excused. What's the cat's name?
so it's that's Smudge.
Smudge. Hey, Smudge. Anyway, carry on. We're getting distracted.
No, it's fine. Where was I? Yeah, so the split was challenging, but we both agreed it was the right thing to do long term. And that was what was important, like having that frame of mind early on, knowing that this will be more positive for our children rather than staying together and co-parenting, living together in a relationship that has broken down. So that long-term view was important.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that, and I want to build on what you talked about there in terms of mindset. And Linda, just hear from you in regards to kind of what mindset did you have going into the split and into the co-parenting relationship, and through it all, how did you kind of keep your children's well-being at the heart of everything that you were doing?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is this is, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I had the experience of being a child of divorce. My parents are divorced, so I had my own lived experience on how that felt and what I would or wouldn't want to replicate for my children. And I think it's a really obvious thing to say, but you are their parent for the rest of their life. This is not just about childhood. It goes through to the life events that come in the future. At the moment it might be sports day in the school play, but it could be university graduation, weddings, sharing grandchildren together at some point in the future, and not wanting my children to feel like they had to pick or choose which parent could be in the room for those events, or both parents being there and everybody feeling awkward and uncomfortable and being on edge in that scenario. So that was really my primary focus, was that this is, you've got to play the long game here. This isn't just about that initial transition period, which is really challenging. Even when you try and do it as best as you can, it is very painful for everyone involved. It is a grieving process that you all go through about the life you thought you were going to have versus the life you're now going to have. And so it definitely came with some challenges. But I think as long as you kind of remember that long term, what you're trying to achieve, and that it's not just a relatively short period of time in your life and your children's life. And I think if I can give a recent example to kind of bring that to life, if that's okay. Last year, one of our children was quite seriously ill quite suddenly. And it was go to A&E, admitted to hospital, transferred to Children's Hospital. It was a very sudden situation that escalated quite quickly, and they were in hospital for about a week. Is absolutely fine now, but in that scenario, I cannot imagine being the child in that hospital bed, being as ill as they were, feeling like they want a particular parent to be in the room, but the other parent doesn't want them to be in the room, or feel uncomfortable that they're both in the room. And similarly, as the parent, I didn't ever want to feel like I couldn't be at my child's bedside if there was a problem. And you don't know what life is going to throw at you. We didn't know that situation was going to happen. So I think you have to think of it in terms of a bigger picture than just the day-to-day practicalities of who's taking them to school and who's got them on what days and who's attending, these kind of meetings. That it's for life.
Yeah. So much resonated there. I think, as Sue was saying in the chat, that long-term view is really, when you say you may be sharing grandchildren in the future, it's so interesting to look at things, just look at life in that way. The decisions that you make now are not just for now, they could be for 20 years time. And I think that story you told about one of your children getting sick is so true. There's so many things that we've spoken about in Equal Parenting Week that are really good at the best of times. You know, at the best of times, it's good to have a healthy relationship, to have flexible working, whatever. But when life gets really tricky, you know, with health issues, with other things that go on in life, we realize how important these conversations are, because it is our safety net. It is what we can fall back on, and without it, life can get very, very difficult. So yeah, thank you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about like practically what you do now. So how do you practically co-parent? Talk to us about what the day-to-day looks like in your relationship, in your parenting. Whoever wants to go first, jump in.
I'll go, and Johnny, you can jump in with anything that I miss. Well, we have a 50-50 custody arrangement. So we split the week in half, and we alternate weekends. So that means that the school week is a fixed routine every week. I know some people do kind of 1 week on, 1 week off, etc. We have one of our children is autistic, so certain routines and clarity around that is really important for them. And also, Johnny and I both felt when we were mapping out what custody arrangements might look like, that we wanted that consistency as well. We wanted to know, for example, that I'm free every Thursday night. So if I wanted to do a yoga class, I could commit to something on a weekly basis because I know that that's my day that I'm going to be free, for example. So, so we have this, the 50-50 split in place. And we don't do it every time, but we after a while, we fell into a routine of doing a handover email to each other. Now that can cover basic things like what they've eaten for the last few days, just so you know you're not giving them spag bowl for the third time that week, or where they're at with their homework, or what lost property is currently circulating around school. That could be quite a big one. So the little things, but also it can cover medical issues that may have arisen, any medication you might have had to give them, any friendship issue. We're deep in tweenage years right now, so friendship issues can be a problem. Any teacher conversations either one of us may have had on the gate, and that kind of thing. And that email process, that works whether we are in a good place with our relationship or in a bad place in our relationship. So we are not relying on having verbal communication or text communication, but then finding ourselves not wanting to have a conversation with that the other parent. The process just works whatever state we're in. And it also enables us to have conversations about the kids that we might not want to have in front of the kids as well, where we're dealing with a sensitive topic. What else, Johnny? Do you want to jump in with anything else? I guess financial arrangement is probably something else that we've put in place.
Yeah, a couple of things I was going to mention. Just reading various co-parenting books that I have, a lot of them talk about consistency between houses, and saying that having a consistent routine between houses is important. I think that was important early on when our kids were younger, but they also understand that there are different rules at school as there are at home. So there are different rules slightly different rules at my house as they are at Linda's house. And that's okay. Depending on the kids, they will adapt to that. But having some consistency of, bedtime, so that there isn't an argument of, well, I stay up later at mum's than dad's, for example. So some consistency around that. Linda mentioned the email, which has been really useful. We have a shared bank account. It's not a joint account, but it uses a system called Hyperjar, where we put money into it, and that's used for paying for clothes or birthday parties, that kind of thing. So we have a kind of loose but structured financial arrangement in terms of that. And then just in terms of, Linda touched on it earlier, but responsibility of appointments. So for example, Linda does haircuts and dentist appointments. I tend to take the lead on sports things, extracurricular things, but we'll go to joint medical appointments, for example. So there are some things that are split and they just naturally fell that way. And there are some things that we both want to be at because they're important. So clear decision-making on who's doing what, I think, has been really helpful. And then in advance planning for holidays and special events, we haven't done it for a while. We used to have like a co-parenting quarterly meeting. It goes back to that kind of business mindset of things, that we would get together and, right, what's the next quarter's worth of school holidays? How are we going to divide up half-term school, summer holidays, that kind of thing? What are we going to do around Christmas? And we've come to our own arrangements around that works each year. So it's being able to plan in advance, I think, which is not my strong point at all, but Linda's helped me with that. Yeah, they're the kind of key things I think that we do on a day-to-day basis that have helped us.
That's amazing. After I spoke to you the first time, I was like saying to my wife, we need to get better because these guys are organized. We're figuring out what we're having for dinner today, like before dinner's getting cooked. So yeah, amazing to hear that. Thank you so much. Right. Linda, Johnny, thank you. Stay on the stage. And Verity, James, we're going to welcome you back on. Hopefully you can see everyone. You can come on camera, come on audio. And questions. So we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A, a couple in the chat. But any more questions, put them in. We're going to pose them to the panel. We've got 12 minutes. We'll get through as many as possible. Okay, so the first one's interesting. How do you navigate co-parenting dynamics and equal parenting with the introduction of step parents? Does anyone have anything to say around that? James, please do.
Well, Verity's probably the expert, but I think do it sensitively. Take your time to introduce a new partner. I suspect it's very threatening. I know it's very, when there's another person on the scene. So just, again, it's about compassion. That new person hopefully is in the child's life for a long time, but they're not going to try and be that other parent. They're not going to be mum or dad. They're going to have and so it's things like that, I think, that are really, 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 really important, I'd say.
I'll just jump in as well, just to say that I completely agree, James. It's that sort of like, slow introduction, and that it's not actually going to unsettle what they know as their status quo, and sort of being really clear about, I suppose, like when they do things together as well with the step parent or with the new parent. And obviously when they become a step parent, they're ultimately going to have been in the child's life for longer than them formally becoming a step parent. So there's going to be an introduction period and all that kind of thing. And also depending on what your arrangements are, and if you spend birthdays together, for example, and the step parent's coming to the birthday party, that it's really that maybe the step parent has met the ex-parent, somewhere separately. They get to know each other, that they can model that good relationship together. So they're forming a new relationship with the ex-partner as well, I think is really important.
Yeah, good advice. Thank you so much. Okay, next question. We have a non-molestation and court orders in place for my ex-husband, as he was violent towards the children and also emotionally abusive. So it's difficult to deal with him and is incredibly draining and triggering. Do you have any tips for navigating this? The children want to see him, so they see him, but is it the right thing to do, given there has been violence and abuse? Tricky one, but Verity, did you have any words to offer?
Yeah, and it's obviously a really, really difficult situation. And we know that non-molestation orders don't kind of get handed out really easily. And so if there is one of those in place, then there's likely to be court orders in place as well that I would recommend that would be followed. Contact centres for having those contact with your with their father. I think whatever's been put in place in these sorts of situations should be followed if those orders have been given out. And I would just say that also using some protective sort of third-party communication provider like Our Family Wizard, where you can communicate in a sort of safe space with that person. That's quite a good way as well to have that communication if you are communicating at the moment. And I would also say that in these situations, services that we offer where we're asking people to speak for themselves and try and negotiate, they obviously would not be appropriate in this kind of situation. So I think it's using communication tools that can be protective in these situations, and following the orders that have been put in place if a court order has been put in place, and using those contact centres for any contact if you can.
Thank you. Okay, so next question. How do you recommend negotiating a change in the co-parenting arrangement? For example, from 70-30 to a 50-50. Anyone got any wise words of wisdom they would like to offer? Don't be shy. Come on, guys. Come on.
I've got. I'm conscious
Go on,
because it
James.
sounds like it's legal. So it depends who you're negotiating with. So, like, I agree with you, Elliot, that it doesn't need to be 50-50. But as children, and obviously Johnny and Linda are probably much better place to talk about this. You know, if parents can both get there practically and want to, I think it's good to get there. It's not obviously a point scoring system, so I suppose if it's the other parent, it's explaining, why you think that's a benefit and maybe how you get there in steps, all that kind of thing. So if it's legal, it's a bit different. I don't know. Maybe Linda and Johnny might have a better view.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can directly answer that, but I think there've been some situations where we've changed, not necessarily the custody split, but we've changed certain arrangements that we had in place. And I think you need to explain, why you want to do it, but also what the benefit to the children is of doing that. And then just give the other person time to reflect and think about it, because I think sometimes you can table a suggestion and expect an immediate response, and the person can be on the back foot kind of listening to that or receiving that. So I think it kind of go gently with it as a suggestion rather than this is what I think we should do. I want to change this now. And just give it some time to bed in.
I'm just going to add that probably you're speaking from experience, Linda, where I've tabled something and it's taken a little while just to, work through.
That's why you're both here, by the way, the experience. That's why you're here.
Step change, what James said, I think is important. So not expecting one parent to necessarily immediately agree to a change, but okay, how can we work towards it? Show a degree of negotiation and ability to compromise.
Yeah. Okay, got another one here. I think, Verity, this might be for you. It says, I have been separated for over 11 years, and unfortunately the relationship has never been great, bouncing from courts, financial abuse, controlling behaviour, and looks after the child full-time. The other parent spends every other weekend. Finding it extremely frustrating, tried mediation, but feels like the other parent will never put the child's needs first. It's affecting their life and well-being and their child's life as well. They are worried this will negatively impact them as they become a teenager. Anything you can offer in regards to anything they can think about doing, advice, support?
That's such a difficult situation that you're in, and it's kind of reflective of what we, I think, talked about earlier about how these things can become so entrenched and can go on for a long time. And if you're doing everything that you can in terms of communicating well and all of those things that we were talking about in terms of putting the child first and being clear about your expectations, there's only so much in a situation that you can control. So I would focus on all of the things that that you're doing that are positive for the child, that reflecting on your own communication and knowing that what you're doing is putting them first and trying to support them in the best way that you can as a parent. And I think that if you've tried mediation and it hasn't worked, then that's a very difficult situation to be in, just to be really honest and to understand and to reflect on that. And I would just say the only thing that you can control is how you're parenting, what you're doing in terms of demonstrating your own relational skills, how you're communicating with your ex, how you're reflecting that with your child, and to keep doing that in the positive way that you are, and try to change the balance and change this and change their approach, because we know that although these things can become really entrenched, we can impact others' behaviors by self-regulating, by communicating well, by staying calm, by demonstrating all those behaviors. And so all I would say is, if you're doing that already, continue to do that, because that's where you can have the positive impact. And where you can't have the positive impact at the moment, it's kind of just that's a very difficult situation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Verity. Okay, I want to end it quickly. A quick question before we close is around schools. So there's some chat in the school around school support. Hey Nicola, my sister is here. Family support. Hey, and they were talking in the chat about the importance of schools and how it can really help support parents and children as well. So James, just to end with you in terms of what is good practice if you are going through separation, what you be asking for from your school in regards to support they can offer?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good point. I think it's important to have clear communication. What we hear is school, if it's difficult, if separation is difficult, can be a real oasis for kids, or it can be the opposite if the conflict comes into school. So ideally, you point the schools to our resources because they'll make quite a big difference, and we want schools to know what they need to know legally, practically, and emotionally. Generally, both parents, we shouldn't be stopping parents sort of trying to pick the child up, things like that. There's quite a lot of that, unless there's a court reason for it, and there rarely is. But if there is, then you hear to that. So kind of getting the school just to understand the situation. And then in our documents, we talk about the 5 to thrive. What are the practical things that parents and schools can do? The main one is have communication joined up, and then notice for things. Notice how friendship groups are, things that are signifying an issue maybe, or if the child's not doing its extracurricular activities that it used to like, that might be an issue. And then look at attendance and look at attainment as just, again, signals that something might not be right. So it's about all parties talking and having a watchful eye to see how this child is managing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Right, we're coming to an end. How we're going to end this real quick is I'm going to ask you all for a sentence. Okay, so what gives you hope around the future of, I guess, how we incorporate co-parenting into this bigger conversation? What are your hopes for how society maybe views co-parenting differently, or what are your hopes for what we can do and we all can do on this call going forward in our relationships? So just one sentence. Linda, I'm going to start with you because you're first on my screen.
That is a big question that I don't know I have a one sentence answer for. But I think, so I'm going to kind of slightly throw it back to what you've been doing this week, Elliot, which is kind of normalizing care responsibilities for parents of all shapes and sizes, whatever, and families of all shapes and sizes, and what that looks like. So I think the more we can normalize parenting in a positive way as everyone's responsibility, the easier it will also be for co-parents.
Lovely. Thank you, Linda. James.
Exactly that. Equal Parenting Week. If we can agree, which we are now, that 2 parents are really important at birth and early weeks and months, then I'm positive we will finally shift to seeing that as a lifelong thing if people separate.
Lovely. Verity?
Sorry, couldn't unmute. I think it's just repeating what everyone else has said, but maybe something around the unique roles of mums and dads and really unique roles of parents, and how, both parents have, such an impact on our children's lives. And so just making it equal is going to ultimately improve their mental health, their well-being, and ours as adults, and all of that. What it gives back is so much more than just what we say in terms of equal parenting.
Lovely. Thank you. And Johnny, last words.
I have hope that for relationships that don't work out and are co-parenting, that there is greater balance of fatherhood and motherhood in the child's upbringing, in that we have positive masculine and positive female roles of equal value for the child's upbringing.
Lovely. Such profound words from you all. You'd think we'd prepared that. We hadn't, by the way. But thank you so much, everyone. You've been fantastic. I have learnt a lot personally as well. So I want to give a massive thank you to James, Verity, Linda, Johnny, everyone. Round of applause for our panel. I trust our attendees are doing this. I hope you are. I trust you. But thank you so much. This has been great. It's been really, really interesting. And, going forward, Equal Parenting Week will get so much bigger next year. And this conversation is going to always be a key part of the messaging and the theme. So it'd be great to kind of have you back involved next year as well. But thank you so much, everyone. Day 5, day 6 tomorrow, we have the big one, push for paternity leave. After this, I'm going to go and decorate some prams, right? I'm doing an arts and crafts project. I've got a self-storage unit with prams in there. So I'm going to decorate them in purple Equal Parenting branding. And you're going to see that all over social media straight after. But thank you so much. equalparentingweek.com. Please talk about it on social media. And it's been a pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, everyone. See you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. That was great.
Yeah, thank you so much. That
cheers.
was brilliant.
That flew by, didn't it? That went so fast.
It really did. There was so much more I could have said as well.
There's always next year, Linda. There's always next year.
I'll write my notes now.
Thanks so much, Elliot. It's been a great week.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Appreciate you both. Take care.
And good luck tomorrow.
Thank you. Take care. See you soon.